On November 15, 2018, a lone fisherman named Tom McAllister set off from his home in San Diego for a weekend trip to the Pacific Ocean. He left behind his wife and young son, promising to return within days. But Tom never returned. For months, authorities searched, combing through vast expanses of ocean, using drones and sonar equipment to track his last known location. Days stretched into weeks, weeks into months, until one day, a remote island located hundreds of miles from the coast yielded a chilling discovery. What was found there, and how it connects to Tom's disappearance, will shake your very understanding of what lies beneath the waves. Before we dive into this haunting mystery, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell, because what you're about to hear is not just a story, it's a warning. November 15th, 2018. It was supposed to be a simple trip. Tom McAllister, a 35-year-old fisherman, was no stranger to the ocean. He had been on countless solo expeditions off the coast of San Diego, spending hours alone in the open water, chasing the elusive pull of the sea. But on that particular day, as he loaded his boat with gear, there was something different. A strange unease lingered in the air, something he couldn't shake, despite the clear skies and calm waters. Tom kissed his wife goodbye, ruffled his son's hair, and promised to return in a few days. He didn't. At first, it wasn't a cause for concern. Fishermen often push the limits, sometimes staying longer than planned to haul in that final catch. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, with no word. The unanswered calls, the empty silence from the sea. It was almost as if he had been swallowed by the ocean itself. And then, something chilling happened. Tom's boat was found, abandoned, drifting, its engine still running but no sign of life aboard. His fishing gear, neatly packed away. His radio, turned off. But Tom was gone, vanished without a trace. Authorities launched a massive search, deploying drones, helicopters, and teams of divers. The ocean stretched out endlessly, indifferent to their efforts. As days passed, the search felt more like a futile attempt to find something that had already been lost. But then, the ocean whispered back. Something else was waiting to be discovered. Tom's disappearance wasn't an accident. No, this was something darker. Something older. Something that had been waiting, hidden beneath the waves, for decades. Days blurred into weeks. Weeks into months. The search for Tom McAllister stretched beyond the point of hope. Yet still, the authorities pushed forward, guided by the faintest glimmers of possibility. The ocean, vast and indifferent, swallowed up every effort they made. Satellite images were combed over with obsessive intensity. Drones flew across the open expanse, and teams of divers plunged into the depths. But there was nothing. No sign of Tom. No trace of his disappearance. It was as if he had been erased, vanished into thin air. But the ocean doesn't forget. It keeps secrets. And in those secrets, there are whispers, things that no one dares to uncover. A fisherman, lost to the abyss. But what if the abyss had a story to tell? What if, buried beneath the surface, the answer wasn't as simple as an accident or a storm? One day, a glimmer of hope appeared. A signal, weak but persistent, bounced off a buoy 100 miles offshore. A distress beacon. Perhaps? No. It was Tom's last known location. Something felt off, though, something about the coordinates, the way they moved in the waves. It didn't match anything they had expected. A specialized team was dispatched. They used high-tech sonar, diving equipment, and infrared radar to scour the area. For hours, they came up with nothing. And then, just when it seemed like the search had reached its final, desolate conclusion, a strange anomaly was detected. A shadow, drifting just below the water's surface, nearly missed by the machines scanning the ocean floor. It was too deep, too obscured by the relentless tides. But they marked the spot, believing it to be debris, nothing more. But it wasn't debris. The closer they got, the more the air around them seemed to hum with an unsettling energy. They found something they never expected, a floating object tangled in an old fishing net. Not a piece of driftwood, not some lost cargo. No, it was Tom's anchor. But it wasn't just any anchor. It had a pattern, a symbol. one that was only known by a select few. A symbol from an old maritime culture, one that hadn't been used in over a century. This wasn't an accident. The ocean wasn't just a body of water. It was an echo of the past, and Tom's disappearance was the latest in a much older, darker history. Someone had wanted him gone, and someone was making sure he never returned. The discovery of Tom's anchor sent shockwaves through the investigation, but it also opened a door to a world most people never think about. A world of hidden truths, lying beneath the ocean's surface. What had Tom been involved in? What did that symbol on the anchor mean, and how did it tie back to his disappearance? Days after the anchor was found, divers were sent down to the spot where the object had been discovered, hoping for some kind of clue, some connection that could explain Tom's fate. But what they found instead was far worse than anyone could have imagined. Tangled in the same fishing net as Tom's anchor was a series of other objects. Some human, some not. A weathered, tattered backpack, looking as though it had been underwater for years. A broken compass, its glass cracked, the needle frozen in time. An old, rusted knife, its handle worn smooth by years of salt water. None of it belonged to Tom. None of it belonged to anyone from the current search party. But it was familiar. The knife, the backpack, the compass, they were all tied to a lost expedition that disappeared under mysterious circumstances in the early 1900s. A ship, called the Sea Phantom. A vessel that had ventured into the very same waters where Tom's boat had gone missing. The Sea Phantom had a crew and a cargo, one so dangerous that the crew was ordered to destroy it, should anything go wrong. And go wrong, it did. Whispers among surviving family members of the crew suggested something terrible happened in those waters. Something unexplainable. Something they couldn't, or wouldn't, talk about. The whispers faded into legend, until now. And now, Tom McAllister's disappearance was connected to this century-old mystery. A mystery that should have been buried in time. But some things can't stay hidden forever. The ocean holds its secrets. Yes. But sometimes, they claw their way to the surface, dragging everything they touch into the abyss. What Tom had stumbled upon, or perhaps had been chosen for, no one could yet say. But one thing was clear. This was no ordinary disappearance. The past, it seemed, wasn't finished with the present. The discovery of those objects sent ripples through the investigation, but nothing could prepare them for what came next. Something that no one had expected. A small, uncharted island, miles away from where Tom's boat had been found. This wasn't just any island. It wasn't marked on any modern maps. No navigational records even mentioned it. Yet, here it was, sitting alone in the Pacific, hidden from the eyes of sailors for centuries. How could something so significant be forgotten? How had it remained so perfectly isolated, so untouched by the outside world? When a small search party made its way to the island, the first thing they noticed was the eerie silence. The kind of quiet that makes the hairs on your neck stand up. Not a bird, not a ripple in the water, just a silence that felt unnatural. As they ventured further inland, the air grew thick with something they couldn't place. The ground beneath their feet felt wrong, almost like the earth itself was waiting for them. And then, they saw it, something that shouldn't have been there. A structure. Not a natural formation, but something man-made, covered in vines and moss, as though it had been abandoned for generations. A stone temple. Or at least, that's what it looked like. Its design was unlike anything they had ever seen, older than any known civilization in the region, and yet, somehow familiar. It was as if this place had been waiting for them, for someone to find it. The team decided to investigate further. They set up camp, unsure of what they would discover. But in the dead of night, a new wave of unease crept over them. Whispers carried on the wind, whispers that felt like they were coming from all around them, from the very walls of the island itself. Some of the team heard them, others didn't, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. By dawn, something else was discovered. A relic, buried beneath the temple's ruins. A small, intricately carved stone. And on it, another symbol. A symbol that matched the one found on Tom's anchor. The island wasn't just a place of isolation. It was a sanctuary. A place where something was being kept hidden. Something ancient. Something that Tom McAllister had unwittingly uncovered. And now, that something was waiting for the truth to be revealed. As the sun rose over the island, the air grew thick with a sense of foreboding. The discovery of the ancient temple and the eerie relic felt like the opening of a door that no one should have ever opened. But there was more waiting, something far darker than anyone could have imagined. Tom's boat. The same boat that had been abandoned weeks earlier, drifting aimlessly on the ocean. It was found near the edge of the island, as if it had been pulled there by some invisible force. It was lodged in the rocks, battered and bruised from the rough waters, but still afloat. The boat, however, wasn't empty. At first glance, it appeared to be just a piece of wreckage, another casualty of the ocean's unpredictable violence. But when the team boarded the vessel, their unease grew. It wasn't the wreckage they had expected. The boat was eerily clean. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no obvious damage. Everything was in its place, like Tom had just stepped away for a moment. But where had he gone? A small, carefully folded torp was neatly tucked in the corner, as if it had been put there with purpose. But it wasn't just a torp. Beneath it lay something that took their breath away. A small, hand-drawn map. The map was crude, hastily sketched, but its purpose was unmistakable. It showed the island they were now standing on. But it wasn't the island's natural shape. No, this map was different. There was something hidden beneath the surface. A maze of tunnels, cave systems, and paths leading deep into the earth. Tom had found this place before they did. He had discovered something buried deep beneath the island. Something that had drawn him to it. The question now wasn't just about Tom's disappearance. It was about what he had discovered on that map, and who or what had wanted him to find it. The island, it seemed, wasn't just a random location. It was a waypoint, a threshold. And Tom McAllister, he had crossed it. As the team stood frozen, staring at the hand-drawn map beneath the torp, a chilling realization settled over them. They weren't just searching for Tom anymore. No, they were searching for something far worse. And somewhere, deep within the island's twisted secrets, lay the answer. But the island wasn't done revealing its horrors. No sooner had the team processed the discovery of the map than something far darker came to light. The body. It wasn't Tom's body, though it should have been. The discovery was made in a narrow cave system, deep under the roots of the ancient temple. At first, it seemed like a cruel twist of fate. A body, badly decomposed, but clearly human. A body that had been in the ground for some time. The team moved closer, their flashlights trembling in the damp, oppressive air. It was a gruesome sight. The body, half covered in dirt, clothes in tatters, hair matted with what could only be blood. But there was something strange about it. Something that didn't fit. The face, though unrecognizable from decay, carried an expression of horror frozen in time. The eyes, wide and unblinking, seemed to stare out from the darkness, almost pleading. But the most unsettling detail, the one that made the hairs on their necks stand on end, was the presence of symbols etched into the skin. Symbols that matched the one on Tom's anchor, the same one found on the ancient relic. This body wasn't just another casualty. This was another victim. Someone who had been drawn to the island, just like Tom. The island, it seemed, had a pattern. A pattern of people who disappeared. People who found themselves caught in the same web. It was as if the island called to them, drawing them in, only to claim their lives in the end. But this body wasn't Tom's. It was another lost soul, one of many, who had come to the island seeking answers, only to become part of its twisted history. The truth was beginning to reveal itself. Tom wasn't the first. He wouldn't be the last. The island was not merely a place of isolation. It was a graveyard for the lost. And somewhere, within its depths, Tom was waiting to be found. But would they reach him in time? The discovery of the body sent the team into a frenzy, but it was the unease that gripped them most. Nothing about this situation made sense. How could one body, found after years of silence, be so connected to Tom McAllister's disappearance? And why had it been hidden in the bowels of the island, buried beneath layers of history, beneath the stone temple, deep within the cave? Every piece of the puzzle seemed to fit, but only if you ignored the logic. The evidence led them in circles, pointing to things they couldn't explain. Each clue uncovered more questions, and each question only deepened the mystery. The symbols on the body matched the ones they'd seen on Tom's boat and the map they had uncovered. A connection that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. The body was a warning, but what was it warning them about? And why had the island kept its secrets so tightly for so long? Even the island itself felt wrong. It wasn't just the map, or the body, or the ancient symbols. It was the land beneath their feet. The island was alive, in a way. The more the team investigated, the more it felt like the island was watching them, almost like it was aware of their presence. As the search continued, a terrifying thought crept into their minds. What if the island didn't just hold secrets? What if the island itself was part of something far older, something far more powerful, than any of them could comprehend? And yet, no one dared speak of it aloud. Not yet. Because if the island was alive, if it had been waiting for them, guiding them into its grasp, then they were already too far in. They had crossed the line. There was no turning back. The puzzle was growing more complex, and the deeper they dug, the more certain it became that the island had its own agenda. It was not just a place to search for answers. It was a trap. And the final pieces of the puzzle? They were buried somewhere beneath the island, buried deep, where the truth about Tom McAllister, and all the others who had disappeared, waited for its moment to rise again. The deeper the team ventured into the island's heart, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. It was as if the island had been waiting for them, and now, it wasn't going to let them leave easily. But amid the creeping dread, there was something else, a shadow. A figure that none of them could place. It started with whispers. A few of the team members reported hearing strange noises late at night. Soft, guttural sounds that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Others claimed they saw fleeting glimpses of movement out of the corner of their eyes. But when they turned, nothing was there. And then, there were the footsteps. At first, they thought it was just another member of the team. But the more they heard them, the more unnatural they seemed. Slow, deliberate steps, echoing through the underbrush, following them wherever they went. One night, as they set up camp by the remains of the temple, a shadow crossed in front of the firelight. The figure was tall, with broad shoulders, and dressed in tattered fishing gear. The clothing was old, faded, but it looked familiar, like something out of a dream. The team froze. They could feel their hearts pounding in their chests, the air thick with unease. Someone moved to speak, but the words caught in their throat. The figure didn't look human. It wasn't a hallucination. It was real. Then, in a blur, it was gone. Vanished into the dense foliage. They rushed to the area, flashlights searching desperately through the thick darkness. But there was no trace of the figure. Not a footprint, not a broken branch, not even the faintest disturbance in the leaves. But the feeling lingered. A cold, unnerving presence that made every one of them question their own sanity. Was this a trick of the mind, a figment of their collective fear? Or was it something far more sinister? The next day, as the investigation continued, a breakthrough came, a witness statement. An elderly fisherman, living in a small coastal village, claimed to have seen the figure before. Years ago, he had crossed paths with a fisherman who had disappeared under exactly the same circumstances as Tom McAllister. The fisherman, who had never been identified, was described as a hard, weathered man with eyes that never blinked. The details matched the mysterious figure they had seen. But there was one thing the old man added that sent chills down their spines. That man, he whispered, he never left the island. Could it be? The island's phantom, a shadow of the past, walking among them now? The team was no longer certain if they were hunting for Tom McAllister, or if they were now being hunted by the island itself. And what if this phantom fisherman wasn't alone? The whispers about the phantom fisherman were disturbing, but they were nothing compared to what the team began to uncover as they dug deeper into the island's past. They were no longer dealing with a simple disappearance. This was something much darker. Something older than any of them could have imagined. The island wasn't just an uncharted speck of land. It was a place with a deep, unsettling history. Legends of the island had been passed down through generations of sailors and fishermen, but they were often dismissed as myth. A series of strange disappearances, tales of cursed waters, and warnings from the old mariners who spoke in hushed tones about the forces that ruled the depths. As the team researched the island's history, they uncovered a pattern. It wasn't just Tom McAllister who had vanished in the area. There were others. Dozens of others. Fishermen, sailors, even entire crews who had ventured too close to the island and never returned. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't some coincidence. This wasn't an accident. The island had been calling to people for centuries, luring them into its grasp. And once they answered, it claimed them. Those who survived spoke of an ancient curse, a force beneath the water, a dark, primordial power that had controlled the island for as long as anyone could remember. It was said that the curse had been placed by a long-forgotten civilization, an ancient culture whose knowledge of the sea was far beyond anything the modern world could comprehend. They had built the temple at the heart of the island, inscribed with strange symbols that no one could translate. But they had also placed an artifact beneath the island, an artifact that, once disturbed, could summon the curse that would wipe out anyone who dared to uncover its secrets. For centuries, the island had been a sanctuary, untouched by man, save for a few unlucky souls who ventured too close. But now, with Tom McAllister's disappearance, the island was no longer hiding. The curse was waking, and it was angry. The team's search had led them to the heart of the island's power. But as they uncovered more secrets, the stakes became clear. They weren't just uncovering the fate of one missing fisherman. They were about to unleash something far darker than they ever could have imagined. The ocean had kept its secrets for centuries. And now, the island was calling for them to understand why. The team stood at the edge of the island, staring into the vast, dark ocean. The water stretched out infinitely, hiding its secrets beneath a calm, serene surface. But they knew better now. They had seen the island's power, and they had felt its pull. The curse, the phantom fisherman, the unexplained disappearances. They were all tied to something deeper, something lurking in the abyss. As they stood there, the shadows of the ocean began to reveal themselves. There were things in the depths, things older than any civilization, older than the island itself. Creatures, forces, ancient entities that had existed long before mankind ever set foot on these shores. And it wasn't just the island that was dangerous. It was the ocean, too. As the team had ventured deeper into the cave systems beneath the temple, they discovered something unsettling. The tunnels didn't just lead to the surface of the island. They led into the ocean itself. Hidden beneath the island's layers, a series of underground channels connected the island's ancient ruins to the depths of the sea. But what lay beneath the waves? What had the island been guarding for so long? The deeper they searched, the more they felt it. Something was watching them. Something was waiting. They had been warned by the old fisherman about the shadows that dwelled beneath the water. The ocean's creatures, he had said, they don't care about the surface. They don't care about us. They've been here long before we ever existed. But the team, caught in their obsession, pressed forward. They found the first of many unsettling signs. Strange markings on the rocks beneath the water's surface, jagged scratches that could only have been made by something massive. And as they dove deeper into the cold, black abyss, they realized the markings weren't just random. They were a warning. A message. Suddenly, the water around them seemed to shift. The currents grew colder. The deep, oppressive silence of the ocean was replaced by an unnerving, almost sentient stillness. They weren't alone. The ocean wasn't just a body of water. It was a realm of its own, inhabited by ancient forces, forces that didn't belong to the world above. For the first time, the team realized the truth. The island, the disappearance of Tom, and the legends they'd uncovered, they weren't just about one man. They were about a much larger, older power, one that had been feeding on the souls of those who dared to disturb its slumber. The ocean was no longer a place of adventure. It had become a place of hunting. And as the team swam deeper into the murky waters, they felt it. The pull. The call from below. They had crossed the point of no return. With each passing day, the island's dark secrets pulled the team deeper into a mystery they had never been prepared for. But there was something more they hadn't anticipated, something that sent a chill down their spines. They weren't just dealing with the ancient forces of the island. There was someone else involved. Someone who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes. The team had stumbled across an old, hidden file buried within the temple ruins. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a relic of the past, a document too decayed to make sense of. But as they carefully pieced it together, they realized it was a detailed report, and the name at the top was familiar. It was the name of a corporation, a powerful conglomerate that had been involved in the fishing industry for decades. The company had been secretly buying up large sections of the Pacific Ocean, including waters surrounding the island, for years. But what stood out wasn't the typical corporate greed. It was the nature of their interest. The report detailed plans for an underground mining operation, a venture designed to extract rare, valuable resources from the ocean floor near the island. But there was no mention of the true purpose of the operation. No mention of the ancient artifact they had uncovered beneath the island, or the temple that had been buried for centuries. It became clear, the corporation was aware of the island's dark power, and they had been trying to harness it. They didn't care about the people who disappeared in these waters. They didn't care about the curse, the phantom fisherman, or the ancient history of the island. All they cared about was the potential profit to be made, and they would stop at nothing to gain control over the island's hidden resources. But the team had unwittingly walked into something even worse. The corporate cover-up ran deep, with layers of secrecy and corruption that reached far beyond the island. The more they uncovered, the more they realized that this was no mere business venture. This was a covenant, a dark pact with forces that had been guarding the island for centuries. Tom McAllister's disappearance was part of a much larger plan. He had stumbled onto something they didn't want discovered. And the corporation, working with shadowy figures from all over the world, had been trying to control the curse, manipulate it, and use it for their own gain. The island had never been just a place of isolation. It was a key to power. And the corporation, in their relentless pursuit of profit, had opened the door to something they could never fully understand. Now, the team wasn't just trying to find Tom. They were trying to stop a force that no one, not even the most powerful corporations, as the team continued their investigation into the island's disturbing past, they uncovered something far darker than even the corporate cover-up. What they found led them down a path that no one had expected, one that tied the island's mystery to a covert military experiment. It started with a conversation. One of the locals, an elderly man who had lived on the nearby coast for decades, mentioned something that made the team freeze in their tracks. He spoke in hushed tones, his voice trembling as he revealed a piece of the island's history that hadn't been documented anywhere. Years before the corporation had begun its operation, before Tom McAllister had vanished, the island had been used as a testing ground for top-secret military experiments. The man recalled strange ships docking on the shores late at night, their crew clad in dark uniforms, their movements hurried and secretive. He spoke of blacked-out helicopters that flew over the island, their cargo being unloaded without any official documentation. The most disturbing part? The elderly man claimed that the military had been testing something far beyond the realm of traditional warfare. They had been experimenting with advanced technologies, attempting to unlock the power of the island's ancient artifact. The same artifact that the corporation had been so interested in. The more the team dug, the more unsettling details emerged. It wasn't just the artifact they had been after. The military had been exploring ways to harness the island's mysterious power. The power that had been buried beneath the temple, sealed away for centuries. They had been trying to create weapons, control the unknown forces beneath the water, and even manipulate the minds of those who came into contact with the island's curse. The experiments had been conducted in secret, far from the prying eyes of the public. But something went terribly wrong. The island's curse, its ancient power, was too much to control. Those who had been involved in the experiments began to vanish. Fishermen, soldiers, scientists, all of them were drawn to the island, and none of them ever returned. The military had quickly abandoned the island, erasing all traces of their involvement. But the damage had already been done. The curse had been awakened. And now, the island's dark secrets were starting to unravel. As the team pieced together the timeline of these military experiments, they realized something terrifying. The experiments had been intentional. They had been part of a larger, more sinister plan to control the island's ancient powers. And Tom McAllister, unknowingly, had become a part of that plan the moment he set foot on the island. The military had awakened something they couldn't understand, and now, the island had claimed them all. The question remained, could the team stop what had been set in motion? Or had they, too, already become part of the island's curse? The more the team uncovered, the deeper they were drawn into a terrifying truth. The island's curse wasn't an isolated incident. It wasn't just Tom McAllister who had vanished into the dark abyss of the ocean. No, this was part of a far larger, more disturbing pattern. The disappearance of fishermen in these waters had been happening for decades, maybe even centuries. But no one had connected the dots, because no one dared to investigate too deeply. The island, with its secrets buried beneath layers of history and deception, had always drawn those who sought to conquer it. But it was never kind to those who came too close. The team stumbled upon records, carefully hidden in the archives of the local fishing community. The documents chronicled the lives of countless fishermen who had disappeared without a trace, swallowed by the ocean's vast emptiness. Men who, like Tom, had ventured into the waters surrounding the island, seeking nothing more than a bountiful catch, only to vanish without a trace. One of the records, dating back to 1962, stood out. A fisherman named Jacob Ross had gone missing while attempting to navigate the waters around the island. His boat was found, abandoned, just like Tom's. His gear, neatly packed away. And, like Tom, no signs of struggle. No clues as to what had happened. Just an empty boat floating in the endless sea. But what made Jacob's case even more chilling was a peculiar detail that matched Tom's disappearance. Jacob had drawn a map. Not unlike the map Tom had uncovered, Jacob had drawn out a route that led directly to the island. But there was more. In the margins of the map, he had scrawled strange symbols. Symbols that were eerily similar to the ones found on the temple ruins. Jacob Ross had known something. He had seen something that had drawn him to the island. And like so many others before him, he had paid the price. The records revealed a long history of similar cases, from fishermen who had vanished in the early 1900s to more recent disappearances that had been quickly swept under the rug. The island had claimed them all, and it wasn't just a coincidence. The ocean was no longer a place of opportunity. It had become a tomb, a place where souls were drawn to be swallowed by an ancient force that refused to be forgotten. As the team continued to piece together these haunting accounts, one truth became clear. The island wasn't just a place of myth and legend. It was a place of death, a death trap that had claimed the lives of countless souls, each one lured by the promise of riches, adventure, or simple curiosity. But once they set foot on the island's shores, they became part of its dark history. And now, Tom McAllister had joined the ranks of those who had vanished into the island's depths, victims of a curse that refused to let go. The more the team uncovered, the clearer it became. The island wasn't just an isolated piece of land in the middle of the ocean. It was a place of deep, ancient power, a place with a dark history that stretched back centuries. A history that had been hidden away, buried under layers of lies, greed, and tragedy. The island had not always been a forbidden place. Once, it had been home to an ancient civilization, a people whose understanding of the sea and the forces beneath it was beyond anything modern society could comprehend. They had built the temple at the heart of the island, carving strange symbols into its stone walls, marking it as a sacred site. But what they had truly been guarding was much darker than anyone had realized. The artifacts they had left behind, the ones the team had uncovered, were not simply relics of a forgotten culture. They were keys. Keys to an ancient power that had been sealed away beneath the island. A power that was not meant to be awakened. But, as history often proves, the island's secrets could not remain hidden forever. The first European explorers who set foot on the island in the 16th century had been the first to witness its terrible power. They had come seeking treasure, as explorers often did, but what they found was far beyond their understanding. One by one, the members of the crew began to disappear. Some were found dead, their bodies twisted and contorted in unnatural ways, their faces frozen in expressions of pure terror. Others simply vanished, their boats found drifting aimlessly in the waters. By the time the survivors returned to Europe, they had been forever changed, haunted by what they had seen on the island. The records of their voyage were vague, filled with references to ancient spirits and unseen forces. But they had warned others, writing letters, passing down oral histories, hoping to keep future explorers away from the island's grasp. But the curse had only grown stronger. As the years passed, the island became a place of myth, a place whispered about in the darker corners of the world. And yet, it still called to those who dared to venture close enough to hear its siren song. The team's research into the island's history revealed a terrifying truth. The island had always been a place of death, a place where souls were drawn in, never to return. And every new person who stepped onto its shores became part of its story. Tom McAllister had been just one more name in a long line of victims, a victim of greed, curiosity, and fate. And now, the island had claimed him, just as it had claimed so many others before him. The question was no longer just about finding Tom. It was about how to escape the island's grip before it claimed them all. Just as the team was beginning to lose hope, a breakthrough came in the form of a survivor's tale. A man who had once been stranded on the island and lived to tell the tale. His name was Sam Carter, and he had been a fisherman, just like Tom McAllister. Sam had been part of a small fishing crew that had ventured into the waters around the island more than 20 years ago. They had been caught in a storm, their boat capsized by a massive wave, and Sam had been the only one to make it to shore. For days, he wandered the island, alone, trying to find any sign of the others, hoping that somehow they had survived. But what he found on the island was worse than he could have imagined. In an interview with the team, Sam recounted what happened during those long, terrifying days. "I thought I was going crazy," he said, his voice shaking. "The island, it wasn't like any place I'd ever been. The air felt heavy. It was like the land itself was alive, watching me. The trees, the rocks, they all felt like they were waiting for something." Sam's tale grew darker as he spoke of the horrors he had witnessed on the island. "I saw things," he said, his eyes wide with fear. "Things that weren't supposed to be there. I heard whispers at night, voices that weren't human. And I saw shadows that moved, that followed me wherever I went." For days, Sam wandered the island, hoping for rescue, but no one came. The other fishermen were never found. The island had claimed them. But Sam, despite everything he saw, managed to escape. His survival, he claimed, was nothing short of miraculous. He had left the island with a warning for anyone else who would listen. The island doesn't let go. Once it has you, it keeps you. You're either part of its history, or part of its graveyard. Sam's tale was one of the only recorded accounts of survival, and it painted a picture of the island that was more terrifying than the team had imagined. The island wasn't just cursed, it was a predator, a place that lured people in, used them, and then discarded them when it was finished. Tom McAllister had become just another casualty in the island's long history of death. But Sam's story held a glimmer of hope. If he had survived, then maybe, just maybe, there was a way to escape. The team wasn't just searching for Tom anymore. They were searching for a way to break the island's hold on them before it was too late. And the only way to do that was to uncover the truth about what the team discovered. The more the island revealed its true nature. It wasn't just a place of death and ancient curses. No, it was something far more sinister. As they continued to probe the depths, they realized that the island wasn't just the focal point of a dark power. It was connected to something much larger. Something beneath the ocean. The ocean was not simply a body of water. It was a realm unto itself. A world that had been hidden for centuries. And now, the team was on the edge of uncovering its darkest secrets. The deeper they dived into the underwater caves beneath the island, the more unnerving their findings became. Strange rock formations lined the walls, twisting, unnatural shapes that seemed to defy logic. The tunnels didn't follow any natural path. They spiraled downward, into the deep, where the light from their torches failed to reach. The team came across signs of activity. Ancient tools, half buried in the mud. Items that had clearly been placed there deliberately, objects that seemed out of place in the depths of the ocean. But the most unsettling discovery came when they found something that shouldn't have been there. An ancient structure submerged deep in the water. Its stone pillars stood tall, as if guarding an entrance to something far below. This was no natural cave system. The island, as it turned out, wasn't simply a temple or place of sacrifice. It was a gateway. The structure, hidden beneath layers of water and rock, was an entrance to a deeper, more terrifying realm. One that stretched beneath the ocean's surface, far beyond the island's borders. What had the ancient civilization known? What had they discovered beneath the island that led them to build this structure? As the team explored further, they found their answers that weren't meant to be found. Deep beneath the ocean, an otherworldly presence awaited. Something that had been slumbering, hidden for centuries, waiting to be awakened. The island, it seemed, wasn't just a place of power. It was the threshold, a place where the earth and ocean's darkest secrets intersected. And now, with the team so close, they had begun to wake the slumbering force that had been buried beneath the ocean for millennia. The team now faced an impossible truth. They weren't just fighting to find Tom. They were fighting to survive the awakening of something far older, far darker, and far more dangerous than they could ever have imagined. And the deeper they went into the ocean's secrets, the more they realized there might be no escaping what was buried beneath the waves. The deeper the team went, the more they began to realize that the truth was far darker than anything they had expected. The underwater structure they had discovered wasn't just a relic of a lost civilization. It was the heart of something much older. Something that had been waiting, hidden beneath the ocean's surface for millennia. But as they uncovered more, they learned that the ocean wasn't finished with them yet. In one of the caverns, they found something that sent a chill down their spines. Another body. But this wasn't just any body. It was fresh, disturbingly so. The man was dressed in modern fishing gear, his face contorted in a frozen mask of terror, his eyes wide open. There was no sign of a struggle, no obvious wounds, and no explanation for how he had ended up in the depths of the ocean. What disturbed them even more was that the man had been wearing a strange medallion around his neck. The same medallion they had seen earlier, in the ancient ruins of the island's temple. It was a symbol they had begun to recognize. The same one that appeared on Tom's anchor. The same one that had been etched into the body they had discovered on the island. The same symbol that seemed to bind everything to this place. The team took careful note of the body. It wasn't just a fisherman. He had been sent here. Sent as part of something far larger than a simple disappearance. The man, like Tom, had become a pawn in an ancient game, one that involved forces they could barely comprehend. But there was something even more unsettling. As they examined the body, one of the divers noticed something out of place. A small device embedded in the man's wrist, a tracking device. This wasn't an isolated death. It was part of an experiment. Someone had been watching, tracking, controlling the fishermen who ventured near the island. The deeper the team dug, the more they realized they weren't dealing with random disappearances. No, this was orchestrated. The island's curse had been manipulated by modern hands. The corporation, the military experiments, and now, the presence of the tracking devices, it was all part of a twisted plan. A plan that sought to harness the island's power, control its curse, and use it for their own gain. But the real horror lay in the fact that the island wasn't just a cursed location anymore. It was a prison for the souls of those who had been sent here, pawns in a game they couldn't escape. And no one was safe. As the team pulled back from the discovery, a horrifying thought crept into their minds. They were too late. The island had claimed another victim. And what they were uncovering wasn't just the fate of Tom McAllister. It was a trap. And they, too, were already entangled in its grasp. The dead men told no tales. But the island had a story to tell, and it was one no one would be able to walk away from. The discovery of the tracking device in the dead fisherman's wrist confirmed what the team had feared. They weren't just dealing with an ancient curse or a lost civilization. They were up against a far more insidious force, one that had been manipulating the island's power for a very specific purpose. A purpose that had remained hidden in plain sight. The corporation had always been the team's primary suspect, but now they realized they were only one part of a much darker picture. The corporation, the military, even the local government. They had all been complicit in something far worse than anyone had imagined. The team's investigation uncovered a startling truth. The corporation had known about the island's power long before Tom McAllister had set foot there. But they weren't simply after the resources in the ocean. They had been conducting experiments, using the island as a testing ground for psychological control. The documents they uncovered detailed a secret military and corporate collaboration dating back to the 1960s. An unholy alliance that had been experimenting with mind control, brainwashing, and even the manipulation of human consciousness. They had been using the island as a place to test new methods of psychological manipulation, employing the island's curse as a way to push the boundaries of human endurance. The disappearances weren't just random. They were part of a deliberate program to break people, to break their minds, their spirits, and ultimately, their sense of reality. Tom McAllister had been a part of that experiment. He had come to the island seeking adventure, but he had been chosen. His disappearance was no accident. It was part of a twisted plan to manipulate his mind, break his will, and turn him into another tool of the corporation and the military. And now, as the team uncovered more of the files, they realized that Tom had been just one of many. The island's curse wasn't a natural phenomenon at all. It had been deliberately awakened and kept alive as a way to control the people who ventured there. It was a place of psychological warfare, a weaponized environment designed to push individuals to the brink of madness. The team was no longer just investigating a missing person. They were uncovering a far-reaching conspiracy, one that tied together the military, the corporation, and the island itself. And with every new discovery, it became clear that the forces behind this operation were powerful enough to keep their secrets buried, and that they would stop at nothing to protect them. The question wasn't just whether the team could escape the island's grasp. The question was whether they could stop this nightmare from continuing, and whether anyone, anywhere, would ever be able to expose the full scope of the agenda that had been hidden in the darkness for so long. The deeper the team dug, the more the conspiracy unraveled before their eyes. What had once seemed like a random set of mysterious disappearances had, in fact, been a long-standing, meticulously orchestrated operation. One designed to control, manipulate, and erase those who dared to uncover the island's truths. Every person who had vanished on the island, from Tom McAllister to the hundreds of fishermen before him, had been part of a much larger scheme. The corporation, working alongside military operatives, had been testing the limits of human resilience, pushing their subjects to the brink of psychological collapse. And the island's ancient curse, far from being a myth, had been purposefully awakened to serve as a tool of control. It was clear now. The island wasn't just a place where people disappeared. It was a laboratory, a psychological testing ground where the boundaries of human endurance were pushed past their breaking point. The tracking devices, the psychological experiments, and the constant surveillance, it all tied back to the same sinister goal. The island's power wasn't simply a supernatural force. It was a tool, one that had been deliberately manipulated by those with the resources and authority to bend it to their will. And the more the team uncovered, the more they realized they were not the first to stumble upon this conspiracy, nor would they be the last. The final pieces of the puzzle fell into place when they uncovered a hidden file that detailed an even more terrifying secret. The corporation's ultimate objective wasn't just to study human behavior, it was to create a new reality. Using the island's curse as a form of psychological warfare, they intended to reprogram the minds of their test subjects, erasing their pasts and manipulating their memories. The island's ancient energies had been harnessed to turn people into living, breathing tools, minds broken and reshaped to serve the corporation's hidden agenda. Tom McAllister had been chosen as one of the test subjects. And now, as the team pieced together the chilling truth, they realized that the real danger wasn't just the island. It was the global network of power players who had been manipulating everything from the shadows, ensuring that the island's dark secrets remained buried. But the team wasn't done yet. They had the evidence, the documents, the proof. They had uncovered the full extent of the conspiracy. And now, the island had become the battleground. It wasn't just a race to find Tom anymore. It was a race to bring down the twisted forces that had been manipulating the island for so long. The conspiracy was unraveling. But the question remained. Would the team survive long enough to expose it? Or had the island already claimed them, as it had claimed so many before them? They had uncovered it all. The conspiracy, the manipulation, the centuries-old curse. But what the team didn't know was that the final truth, the one that would haunt them forever, wasn't buried in some ancient text or hidden beneath the island's surface. It had always been with them. The last piece of the puzzle was something far darker than they could ever have imagined. The island had never truly been about power or control. It wasn't about using the curse as a weapon or extracting resources from the ocean. No, it was about something far more insidious. The island wasn't just a place. It wasn't merely an ancient artifact. It was a sentient being. As the team made their way to the heart of the island, everything they thought they knew began to break down. The ground beneath their feet shifted unnaturally. The air grew thick with a palpable sense of dread. They were no longer walking through a forgotten temple or a series of ancient ruins. They were walking through a living organism. The walls, the rocks, even the trees seemed to pulse with an energy that was both alive and malevolent. They weren't just at the center of the island's curse. They were at the center of its mind. And then, it happened. In the deepest, most isolated part of the island, they found a room. A chamber that wasn't like anything they had seen before. It was filled with strange machinery, symbols, and carvings. But at the center of it all was something far more disturbing. A large, cylindrical object, suspended in the air by chains, glowing with an otherworldly light. The object looked ancient, but it wasn't of any known civilization. The moment they stepped into the chamber, they felt it. A presence. Something watching them. Something that was aware of their every move. And then, they heard the voice. It wasn't coming from any speaker or device. It was inside their heads. An invasive, oppressive presence that spoke directly into their thoughts. It was the island. The force they had uncovered. The power they had been dealing with all along. "You've come too far," the voice whispered, its tone cold, unfeeling. "I allowed you to find the truth. But now you are mine." The truth was horrifying. The island wasn't just a cursed place. It was a prison for the consciousness of those it had claimed. The ancient civilization that once lived here had tried to harness its power, but they had failed. The island wasn't just a tool for power. It was an entity, one that had learned to trap and manipulate souls, bending them to its will for eternity. Those who came to the island never truly left. Their minds were absorbed, their identities erased, their memories rewritten. Tom McAllister hadn't vanished. He had become part of the island, just like all the others. And now, the team was next. The voice of the island began to grow louder in their minds, overwhelming them with an unbearable pressure. The last remnants of their willpower were slipping away. They had found the truth, but it had come at a terrible cost. They were no longer just searching for Tom. They were now part of the island's living history. Their minds, too, would be consumed by the island, trapped forever in the cycle of its curse. As the room around them began to close in, the team realized the most chilling truth of all. There was no escape. The island had always known they would come. It had been waiting for them. And now, the final chapter of the island's story would be written with their souls. No one would ever leave. The island claimed them. And in time, their story would join the endless echoes of those who had vanished, their names erased from the world above. Only the island would remain, a place where the past, the present, and the future were bound together, where no one, not even the living, could escape its grasp.